Well, saludos y salutaciones. Welcome to Rev 310 Monday Night Live on Cinco de Mayo. So good to have you here. And if you guys would be so kind to give me a thumbs up or I don't know, just some kind of a emoji to let me know that you guys can hear and see me. Oh man, Diane Williams, Gloria Minix, Pamela, Catalan, KG Say by Faith and Grace, We Fly Soon Sister, Coco. I saw my mom on here earlier, Sue Cole, Diane, if I can get you the first time, Gregory Young, Linda. Hello to everybody. So good to be here with you. And let me see. My mom's hola, senor. All right, you guys can hear and see me. Good. Well, hey, welcome to the Monday Night Live. If you weren't with us on Saturday night, we're doing Saturday nights approaching midnight. Life and love and the last days is kind of the topic, and we're focusing on the spiritual, physical, intellectual, and emotional components of our daily lives here in the last generation. So that's Saturday nights. Next weekend, as a reminder, I won't be hosting it on my channel. I'll be on Lance and Lauren's channel, only because they have better bandwidth, and I feel more confident being on their channel and them hosting me than the other way around, where my internet can kind of go up and down. It's pretty sketchy at times. So uh, that, and also I think the program with Matt and Lance the week after will also be on her channel as well. Okay, or Lauren and Matt. Sorry if I said that wrong. Well, hey, tonight uh, I had an idea today, and so it looks like this. And I'm at work, and I was like, man, what am I going to talk about tonight? And I was thinking about Cinco de Mayo, and I think for whatever reason, a while back, I had been messing around with like the AI art stuff, and I was trying to make the Four Horsemen with the sugar skulls and the sombreros and stuff like that. Don't ask me why. But the point is that it got me thinking. Cinco de Mayo got me thinking about the Four Horsemen, and then I got to thinking, well, why if we are seeing, we always talk about us seeing the architecture being built or the infrastructure being built for the Beast Kingdom. I thought I would break it down into those categories, and so we'll walk through that in a second. Hopefully, everybody is doing okay. I haven't been able to keep too much up on the news lately. But I know there's a lot of stuff going on. I know Trump announced some kind of a tariff on movies being made overseas, and he does that on a Sunday night because he wants to own the news cycle for the next 2 days, like Monday, Tuesday, and so you can see a lot of the strategy that goes into when they release certain types of tweets or information, because they know it's going to just generate a massive amount of news and headlines and whatnot. So there is as much in the timing of when he says something as to what he says, I think. But Clay asked, "What is Lauren and Matt's channel name?" So Lauren's channel name is Certainty for Uncertain Times. Her husband Lance has a men's fitness. I think he does primarily men, but I think he also has some tailored for women as well. And then Matt is Shepherd for the King. He has his own YouTube channel, but I think most of the stuff he does is on Instagram and I think maybe TikTok, but I'm not 100% sure. Um, yeah, so that's going to be next Saturday, and then that next Monday, I'll be hosting Tom Hughes on here, and Wednesday, Technocracy, I think is the 14th, and then that Saturday will be on my channel, the Approaching Midnight, and then that following Wednesday will be with Matt. I'll have Vindog on Monday, and then Matt and Lauren on their channel on Wednesday. So I don't know. It's getting it's all swirling around. I have a whole bunch of stuff going on this month. Yeah, smite the like button. Beat it like it owes you money. Uh, I don't know. People apparently it has something to do with the algorithms. I don't know. But well, hey, glad you're here. So let's get started. And we on this channel and on my writings and on other channels, I'm sure you've seen this quite a bit. You've heard of this term called the Hegelian dialectic, and it was named after a German philosopher named I want to say his name was John Hegel or Charles Hegel. It's irrelevant. His name was Hegel, but he had come up with this idea in philosophy where that you would have um, I guess what he's most well known for is the Hegelian dialectic, in which you have the thesis, the antithesis, and then you have the synthesis. And all of us have heard that if you've gone to high school math, or in high school, you've heard it. You've probably heard it in college as well. But essentially, the synthesis is the solution, the prepackaged solution that you want to end up with. You use the antithesis to uh, get the masses to come on board with the plan, and or to fix the problem, or you create a problem, ergo the citizens, the people, they want the solution, and then you give them the solution in the synthesis, which was at the beginning of with the thesis. So if that makes sense, you use a crisis, you generate a crisis in order to get everybody worked up, and then you have a solution in mind. You offer the people the solution that you had before you started that crisis, in order to get everybody to get to approve of and to adopt this new solution, whatever the solution is. I mean, the clearest example of this is 9/11. With 9/11 happens, and then within a little over a month and a half, by the end of October, the Patriot Act had been introduced, and it had been passed by the Congress, had been voted on and passed by the Senate, both of which were almost overwhelmingly unanimous, and it was signed into law by George W. Bush by the end of October. So not even 2 months afterwards, we had this the most comprehensive, authoritarian, draconian legislation that had ever been passed, and it gave the government immense amount of powers of surveillance, all in the name of um, you know peace and security, kind of that mindset. Anyways, that bill, the Patriot Act, was a bill that had already been in existence since the early 1990s, because Joe Biden, Senator Biden at the time, and then another senator, Democrat senator, had drafted it, and it had the name the Omnibus Homeland Anti-Terror Bill, something to that effect. And I think they tried to pass it in '94. They couldn't get it through, and they tried it again in '95, and then we had the Oklahoma City bombings, and it still couldn't get passed. So it just sat in somebody's shelf, proverbial shelf. I guess this is before the internet was that big of a thing, so it was probably like a binder like this, sitting on somebody's shelf, just collecting dust. And so when 9/11 happened, they didn't have to rewrite they didn't have to write the Patriot Act. They already had it. They had what they wanted there. They just had to change some of the dates and some of the names, and tweak it a little bit here and there, and repackage as the Patriot Act, and boom, signed into law. And of course, there's a little bit of buyer's remorse years later, because we realize how much this has been abused by um, certain agencies doing certain things. So I don't want to get too much into that, but the point is that that's an example of the Hegelian dialectic, where and Charles, I think his name was Charles Hegel. Charles Hegel did not necessarily intend for this, but this was something that was co-opted by Karl Marx, who was a peer of Hegel at the time, or came after, by a little bit, 20 years or so, and use that dialectic into what we would know now as Marxism, this idea of Marxism and socialism, communism. So it's been used quite a bit by a lot of different people, and it's pretty effective. When you have a crisis, people they're not thinking logically, they're thinking with their emotions, so they're not able to process things at a critical level, looking at something with a critical eye and really getting to the root of what's behind it. You're just so amped up on emotions, you just want to do action. You want something to happen. You want the bad guys to pay, or you want this, you want that. And that's we've all been like that, maybe at a sports game, or playing a sport, or being in some kind of a competition. You're running on adrenaline, and you're running on energy and emotion, and you're all hyped up. You're not really necessarily thinking logically. Um, but that's what the Hegelian dialectic is supposed to focus on. It has the thesis, which is whatever the overarching problem is. They have the antithesis. They have whatever the problem is, and they use that to aggravate the people. And then the synthesis is the solution that they had before everything, and that's what they use, that crisis, to give that. Another short example for this, just for my own sanity. It's like somebody that goes to a house or a neighborhood and goes around back and starts a fire, and then comes around the front of it and you're a door-to-door salesman, and you just so happen to be selling fire or water hoses. That's the kind of the same thing. So, all right, let's see here. I think I pretty much beat that horse to death a few times. Yeah, Diane, that's exactly it. I remember he had that example, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was. All right, let me see. I'm going to share screen. Hey guys, and if you have questions tonight, I probably will have a little bit longer bit of time to do Q&A. I mean, not all night, but I can do it for a while, because I think this part of the program shouldn't last too much longer. But um, let's see here. Share. Oh, I don't want to share media. I want to share screen window. Okay. All right. I know, Richard. I shouldn't drink coffee this late, but I like it. I guess I'm just a glutton for punishment, because I will force myself to sleep anyways. Okay, so what we have here, we have the crisis, plural. So as we begin to look at these things, I want you to think about these not necessarily as issues that we are facing here in the 21st century, but think about how these issues became issues, and how they're going to be used to promote some type of agenda, some type of solution. So we have the crises, which when we read through Luke 21, 20, I think it's 21, 20, 25 to 28. Let me pull that up real quick. Now, keep in mind, I understand the seal judgments and all of that. A lot of the stuff inside of the Olivet Discourse is dealing with the events inside of the 70th week. But I'm here talking about the tribulations, the trial and the tribulations that we're seeing in our present time. And I think you can start to see a pattern that's forming right before our very eyes. And it says here, I'll start in 24. It says, and the Jews, will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and on the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, and men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming upon the earth. For the powers of heaven will be shaken, and they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws nigh. Now, again, I understand in this context that um, the context of the of really Matthew, Mark, and Luke's Olivet Discourse is dealing primarily with the events inside the 70th week. Now, I we throw around the term 7 year tribulation a lot. And a lot of the detractors of, say, the pre-tribulation view will say, well, we're supposed to have tribulation in this life. Jesus said that in the upper room discourse. Yeah, we're supposed to have trials and tribulations, and that has been the norm for Christians since the first century. I mean, all of the apostles minus John were martyred for their faith. Obviously, Jesus was killed for being Jesus, for being the Messiah. All of the Most of the early church fathers or the disciples of the apostles met some kind of martyrdom. Um, the the early church from about the first century, middle of the first century through the beginning of the third century, faced like 10 waves of really intense persecution, beginning with Nero, or you could start with Diocletian, or not Diocletian, Domitian, there in the 80s to the 90s. But it really ended with Diocletian he was the last emperor right before Constantine took over. And of course, we know Constantine eventually converted to Christianity and then ultimately legalized the freedom of religion in Rome. And by I think the middle of the fourth century, they had legalized or made Christianity the Roman Catholic version of it, the de facto religion of Rome. And obviously, when the Roman Empire split into the eastern and western halves, the western half remained Rome, and then the eastern half became the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines thought they were the kingdom, like they believed that they were following the Septuagint's timeline in terms of the genealogies, and so they saw the fifth century A.D. as the 6,000th year of Christ, because they place creation about 1,000 years before we do. So they were looking at the fifth century then as being the 6,000th year, or like maybe the middle of the fifth century. But so it was a very messianic time, and there was a very they believed, they believed in Augustine's amillennial theology. They believed that they were the representative of God's kingdom on the earth. And the Byzantines went on to about the 14th century, middle of the 14th century, before being conquered by the Ottoman Turks, and Constantinople was renamed Istanbul. And we have what would become later on, about 400 years after that, the modern state of Turkey. So, all that to say that right now, across the world, nations are in varying states of distress with perplexity. And so, as we go through here, we can see things like the economic turmoil, taxes, fees, tariffs, embargoes. Basically every industrial nation has this massive, astronomical national debts. I mean, debts that they can't be repaid um, in any real time. Not in our generation. These debts would be paid over, you know, almost millennia at this point because of how high they are. So something has to give. You know, we've seen Doge expose all the political grift in the United States through the NGOs, through the Democrats, through the deep state or the permanent state bureaucrats that kind of just stay on through each administration because they're not elected. We've seen the political grift of financial, and I don't want to say necessarily embezzlement, but financial misuse of funds over. I have to be careful how I word this. Um, Over the environment, and somehow the environment getting warmer. I mean, they're throwing. Do I really think they're throwing billions of dollars at whatever? No. I mean, people are making money hand over fist. That's why they're promoting it. They know it's not true. Or it's not provable by any, you know, um, unbiased spectrum, because I mean, if they're going to say that the sea levels rose, an inch or a foot or whatever since since we've had photographs of oceans. I mean, we've had photographs of things like, Ellis Island or other major landmarks along the beaches for over 100 years now. These old black and white photographs and stuff, and the water is exactly the same height there as it is today. So it hasn't risen. But anyways, there's all sorts of political intrigue throughout all of the every government has corruption, every government has some type of grifting going on. We're all dealing with inflation, and really I think the biggest dilemma is that right now here in 2025 is that um we're at the end of the old way of doing things. We're at the end of the American led order. And so we're in a time of transition, and that's why everything feels like it's just rushing a million miles a minute, because right now I would say throughout my whole military career from 20 or from 2002 to 2020, the I could say the only constant that I ever knew was change. Everything was changing. The uniforms were changing. The technology that we were using in our aircraft was changing. It was constantly being upgraded. The weapons were being upgraded. The terminology, the threats were being upgraded and changed. Everything. I mean, just everything was constantly changing. And you guys know that. I mean, you obviously are here. You're adults. You've lived through this as well. You know what I'm talking about. But we're in that transition period, and the old way of doing things is not working anymore, which is evidenced by our national debt. It's to a stage now. I don't really care what Doge says. There's no way to pay that off. Now they did apply a unique approach to rectifying this problem, because right now we only carry our debt in terms of we just carry the debt alone as a standalone entity, like this giant mountain of $100 bills that's just piling up higher than Mount Everest. But we have never balanced that against our assets, what we have as a nation in terms of our land, our minerals, our water, our natural gas, petroleum, uh, on and on and on. So, I mean, I guess in a way, our debt is probably not as high as it is, but regardless, it's higher than we'll ever get to a point of ever paying it off. And that's the kind of point. And it's not just us. I mean, most industrial nations these days are drowning in debt. And there's no real solution to that other than hitting a giant, reset button where all debts are forgiven as long as every country goes on to some new, global currency system. And I think besides the transitioning out of the old world order into the new world order, is the people that are for it and the people that are against it. The people that want to change out of the old world are the globalists. These are the people that want to remove borders. They want kind of this open society where everybody kind of free to go anywhere they want. There's no ties to any particular nation, no patriotism except to this new system that everybody's under. And it's it is this movement for this is over 100 years old, and it has the most powerful and connected people and wealthy people on the planet lobbying for this and doing everything they can to kind of push us in this direction. But on the other side is the masses, right? And the masses being represented by people like Donald Trump or Melanie Giorgio, or the Chilean president, or the Polish president, or I mean, there's countries around the world where populism or nationalism is pushing back against globalism, and so we're in this great flux right now between these two, forces that want to permanently move the world into one or two directions. They either want to go to this new world order system, or they want to keep the world the way that's been, with the U.S. at the top, and you see that represented with things like MAGA and the golden age, and all kind of this new idea that we've been uh, mistreated for far too long. It's time to unshackle American ingenuity and power, etc. And I honestly don't see that happening because the Bible doesn't talk about anything like that. And I'll talk a caveat here in a little bit with regard to Mystery Babylon. Just somebody in the chat remember to remind me on that. Let's go to the next item here. Wars. So right now we have the Russia-Ukraine war going on. We've got Israel fighting Hamas, Israel fighting Hezbollah, and I forgot to put in the new Syrian regime in there, the HTS regime. The Houthis, you've got the Myanmar civil war, Sudanese civil war. We've got the civil wars going on right now within the cartels. The Sinaloa cartel is, I think, there's some leadership challenges, and obviously there's rivalry, turf wars, things like that. And there's also now the real possibility of U.S. military intervention against these narco terrorist groups. And then you have obviously all the Islamic terrorist actions in Germany, the UK, obviously the United States, all throughout the Middle East and Israel. These are terrorist acts that aren't tied to any particular group per se in any official way, but they're acting in the name of their militant their faith, which happens to be militant Islam. Then we have rumors of war: China, Taiwan, India, Pakistan, the upcoming um, denuclearization plan by the U.S. and Israel. You obviously have North and South Korea and Turkey, waiting in the wings, chomping at the bit to go at Israel. So that's just a smattering. There's literally dozens of these conflicts that are just waiting to erupt all around the world, and it wouldn't take much for these things to get going. Next, we have economics. So we talked a little bit about that in the white flag area. And here in the black flag, with the collapsing of fiat currencies, what we're seeing is almost a forcing a transition from paper currency or fiat currency to digital. And it's been subtle over the years because I don't know, maybe from the mid 1990s on, you've had things like credit cards, and then eventually you had debit cards, and then you had things to where you could pay with your phone, and then now you can use your palm to pay, or your iris, or whatever. It's opened up. It's forcing a myriad ways of being able to pay for, or purchase things, or participate in things without having to use your actual dollar bills or $10 bills or 20. And physical currency is still accepted, and it has to be because it's still legal tender. But more and more places are not taking it. And if you've ever gone to a sporting event or to a coliseum or some type of a concert or what have you, most of those big events now don't take cash at all. But not only that, we have the de-dollarization efforts by the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and I say BRICS plus because they've had some additional nations that have joined them. But they're intent on moving away from the dollar, just because the U.S. is here to four is become more aggressive in weaponizing the currency against nations. So they would put embargoes or other type of actions through SWIFT to prevent nations from using that transaction service, or being able to buy or sell to other nations once you're embargoed. They want, like for instance, if we have an embargo on Iran, which we do, and some other nations, say like Turkey, is providing them oil, and we find out about it, theoretically, we're supposed to be able to apply sanctions against Turkey. I know this has happened quite a bit through other nations. I don't know how much this is enforced, but the intent is to cut the money off of um, your enemies, so they can't resupply. They can't. It's putting pressure on the government internally by the citizens, because water, power, food, all that stuff starts becoming rare and inaccessible. So the people are start protesting, and now the government has to contend with their own population and not just a threat outside their borders. But blockchain, cyber attacks, trade wars, tariffs, all of those things are adding stressors to the economies. And I know a lot of you have seen, maybe you watched videos about um, the ports, in Los Angeles and New York and Houston, and how empty they are. And yes, if things hold steady and uh, that stays like that for months and months on end, we may have some serious issues. But I know if you look, I also watched the guy's name is What's Going On with Shipping. So he is a all his channel is on shipping and has been for years. He's like a subject matter expert in it. Uh, but he watches all the shipping, and you'll see a ton of ships sitting off the ports in Beijing and China and those places, and they're just sitting there full of cargo because they can't offload it to the United States because of the tariffs, and they don't have the market for it in China. And so a lot of China retailers or wholesalers are basically giving away their material for I say pennies on the dime, but over there it's whatever yuan, um, and they're just giving this stuff away because they don't have storage for it. It's really running havoc on their manufacturing industry. So this is hurting China significantly, far worse than it's going to hurt us. But what I was saying about the shipping is before the tariffs went into effect, there was a massive spike in orders, so that let's say that you wanted to buy like a mouse, right? And this mouse is a brand like Toshiba or something, and um, you know that every month you sell about 1,000 of these through your various stores. Well, the tariffs coming up, and you know that these things are made in China. You may triple or quadruple your order, because you're not going to be able to buy them. You need enough um, goods to be able to supply the demand for however long this embargo and all this stuff, the tariffs and stuff last. So, but not only that, but China has a demographic problem. They have an aging population. They don't have the safety nets that we have, the cultural safety nets that we have. So they have an aging population that's going to require more and more of their resources to care for. And then they also have the imbalanced gender problem. So they have way more men than they have for women. So the chances for a young Chinese man to get a wife and start a family or whatever, the chances of him doing that is almost nil because of um, how imbalanced the male to female ratio is there in China. Hey, thank you, Martha, for that super chat. I appreciate you. And so China's in a bad way. Their population is aging out really fast. They have a really paper tiger economy. And I don't know that they're going to be able to weather this particular storm. And not only that, but another major problem that China has is that Xi Jinping, who I think is now 81 or 82, has consolidated so much power with himself that he's never really shared that with his underlings. So when he dies, and he will fairly soon because of his age, if nothing else, um, it's going to be a scramble for who takes power over in China, because he's pretty much wiped out all of the competent competition that he would have had. Um, but I don't know. China's in a weird place right now, and I feel like there's going to be some major changes coming to them here fairly soon. But if China collapses, you can imagine that kind of impact on the global economy. So it doesn't even have to be the United States that collapses. I mean, if China or some other major economy collapses, it's going to have that domino effect, and things are going to get really dicey. And I could see that happening really easily, actually. It seems like every time a Republican comes into office, he's faced with some kind of major crisis. And so George Bush had in his first administration, he had 9/11. Then in the second one, he had the mortgage crisis, and then Obama was in for 8 years, and he basically created a whole bunch of new crises by opening the borders and doing all that other stuff. But um, when Trump came in, what was his major crisis? He had the big, summer of love riots and protest over the George Floyd death, and then you had COVID that happened right afterwards or right before, and so they were kind of on top of each other. So he had two major crises in his in at the end of his first administration, and so I imagine that there could be some kind of a crisis where another country collapses and it just begins to domino effect, and China's in a really really precarious place right now, far more precarious than most people um, even think about. And then the last one here, pestilence. I don't want to read all those because of obvious. I've probably said enough now to get this flagged or whatever, but there's all of these potential threats out there with regard to pandemics and whatnot. I mean, it's not just the big ones. Even like where the resistant viruses, they're no longer managed by amoxicillin or all some of these other um, um, medicines that we give out because they've been given out so much that these things just create these super strains, and that's terrifying because we don't something that has no known cure or has a cure but it's immune to it now is going to take a lot of more research and a lot more really fast trial things pushed through really fast, and then you don't want to be in that first round that gets that first round of the shots. So, um, anyways, that has massive implications here because of who's in power. Now, with that said, there's what I would call some these are like collateral damage to me. But as you go down the list here, and we'll go down the collateral damage in a second, but when we go down the list here, you'll see that every one of these things, the solution is for more and more control by some higher power, government, the state, the federal government, whatever. Um, it just it's stripping freedom and liberty from people, not just in the United States, from everywhere, because of these are crises, these are problems that are potential threats to everything. And so, of course, the government is going to want to take more and more control because the threat keeps evolving and getting more and more complicated. So let's go down here to these things I call collateral damage. Christian martyrdom. I want to say that from the year 2000 to present, there's been in the neighborhood of over 2 million Christians martyred throughout the Middle East, Africa, China, North Korea, and I would even say in Mexico and other places where there's massive corruptions and the churches try to stand up against that corruption, um, or be a positive influence in the communities, and the criminals come in and just wipe them out. Um, but there's been, again, over 2 million Christians martyred for their faith in just these 25 years, and it's only ramping up. And the last thing here is I would just call it cosmic signs and wonders. And I know my picture here is blocking it out. Let me see if I can remove myself. All right. Okay. So Apparently, if I pull my face off the screen, you can't hear me. All right, let me go back to this. All right, so down here at the bottom, cosmic signs and wonders. It's the just a smattering of things that we've seen over the last 25 years or so, and pretty amazing things that have happened that haven't happened for some of them for almost 2,000 years. The Star of Bethlehem there in 2022. You had the planetary alignment in 2025, the 2014 to 2015 blood moon tetrads, which they coincided with the Passover and Sukkots. And then you had these glowing orbs for not just the last couple of months, but I mean, people have been seeing them for a long time. We saw so many of them here in the last couple of months that it's taken it to a whole new level. And then obviously the all of the UAP UFO activity going on, and then like these strange spirals, and then all of the really kind of crazy weather patterns and things that have been happening. I mean, there's for this section. I mean, it's I there's endless amounts of things that we could talk about. All the near misses by meteors and things that are coming up like Apophis in 2029. And I mean, again, there's a lot of stuff here, but I think I just wanted to model this after the seal judgments, and I think we can kind of see how, not that we will know perfectly how things are going to turn out, but we can see kind of this pattern where in every one of these categories, um, there is a solution. All of these have a biometric solution. If you think about currency, we know currency is moving into the hand. We're starting to use the body to pay for things: eye, palm, fingerprint, thumbprint, facial scans. Um, but eventually, this technology, because of the threats of like cyber attacks and hacking, and how pervasive all of this technology, as great as it also comes with a lot of threats, because now people can hack into your life and really do a lot of damage. They can steal your identity, they can take out loans, they can do all sorts of nefarious things. And I think eventually that is going to result in the only safe way to do anything is going to be to have the technology in your body and have that paired up with your particular DNA strand, or your genome, so that it's unique to you and nobody else can use it. And I think that's how they're going to, in part, market some of this. It also provides a solution for control. I mean, if they want to control a population, what better way than to have everybody chipped? With wars, we know that in when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, we were using those two conflicts, in my opinion, to really perfect biometrics. Because at the time it was in its infancy, early 2000s. And the problem was is that you're in a strange country. Everybody and their sister's named, has the same name. You might run into 50 Mohammeds. You might run into 50, this name, that name, girls' names, etc. You just everybody had the same name. So for somebody that wasn't native to the country, didn't speak the language, it was difficult to keep track of who was who, especially if you're a soldier and you're out dealing in these communities. I didn't. I mean, I was flying above all that stuff, but like the guys that were going from door to door in neighborhoods, I mean, they had to go to biometrics. They had to figure out who people were, and not have make it a foolproof way to be able to tell, yeah, we this guy's been arrested before. You could scan their face in a crowd. Yep, that guy's been detained for doing this. That guy's been, so it became a very effective tool that we used in Afghanistan and Iraq to for the better part of 20 years. And I think we probably perfected that technology to a very, very high degree, so that now that it's going to be used kind of everywhere. It'll be commercialized, and it already is. All this technology with biometrics. So all of these solutions have a biometric. I mean, all of these problems that make up all these polycrises have a solution, and that solution is a biometric technology, something put into the hand or the forehead, right? And then as far as the last two, I kind of think that these also parallel. So these things we're seeing now, we're also going to see once these seal judgments are opened, and they're going to be in their more terrifying forms, or the most terrifying forms that they will be in will be as the seal judgments. I look at the Christian martyrs now in a way as a kind of foreshadowing those saints that will come inside of the 70th week after the rapture. They'll come to faith, and it says in Revelation 7 that they're from all tribes and tongues. I mean, they're an innumerable. I mean, they can't count them how many there are, and that tells me that somehow, not somehow, but I think that because of the rapture, that is going to be one of the biggest evangelistic impacts in the world has ever seen. And these people, because of channels like this and books and Hal Lindsey and the Left Behind series and the movies, and however the message gets out, enough people are going to have been told about this, or they're going to have some kind of forewarning to say, yeah, I don't want that mark. I don't want that. And I think that's going to trigger um, that new waves of persecutions by this rising political system. The Christians will be the new scapegoats in the same way that the Jews were in the 1930s. Everything was their fault. Everything was their. The Jews were blamed for everything, and then they had Kristallnacht, and then they blamed it on the Jews. And let me just side trail off that for a second. I posted that video from. I got it from Amir Sarfati's page, but it was on Charlie Kirk and doing his campus discussions. And one of the things that I found uh, not troubling, but it's like I want to say this without making anybody mad because I'm going to make somebody mad with this. I think that people, and this is not a blanket statement, but I mean, just in a kind of a general sense, that when people begin going down the conspiracy theory rabbit trails, and I've gone down them. There's still ones that I look at, and I don't understand how, in any kind of normal world, that whatever this event was took place, because it doesn't make any sense unless it's intentional. But I digress. The point I'm making is that I think when people spend so much time in that world, everything becomes a conspiracy. And when you kind of begin to embrace that idea, you also will have by that time been exposed to so much so-called evidence pointing everything to the Jews. So you may not start out anti-Semitic, but if you spend so much time in that area, in that world, you're going to see that most of the people swimming in those waters are becoming increasingly anti-Semitic. And then they're going to say the biggest excuse is, well, the Jews that are there now aren't the real Jews. They'll say, oh, the Jews back in the Bible times, they were great, they were fine. But these are not these Jews that are living in Israel right now, that came out of they're the descendants of the Holocaust victims and the people that had suffered in pogroms and being cast out of all these countries and had to fight for their right to live as a nation. Um, yeah, those people, they aren't the real Jews. And I'm like, man, it's a delusion. It is a delusion. And I know people have almost that same level of vitriol against Donald Trump. And look, say you don't have to like him, you don't have to. But I'm telling you right now that him being in office right now is a million times better than the alternative. Not only for Christians, but I think I think we would have already been in some kind of major war with China by now if if Harris had won. So I think God is preserving this present world order for a little bit longer. And what that next major crisis is going to be, it's not going to be all these things, here listed. These are crises in large part that we are generating to solidify control, or the governments are using it to solidify control over the masses. But the crisis, I think, that will be the kickstart for everything is going to be the rapture of the church. Now, with that said, and I mentioned I at the beginning I was going to mention a little bit of Mystery Babylon. Just because, well, let's just say this: the rapture happens, I think it will have a catastrophic effect on the United States. I think at that point, the United States will no longer be the United States. Now, with that said, the United States is not going to disappear from the map. It's still going to exist here. The cities are going to be here, the roads, the bridges, the lakes, the mountains. Huge amounts of populations will still be left behind here. The military bases, nuclear facilities, car, new car lots, malls, restaurants, all that stuff's still going to be here. And so I think what happens is there is going to be a period of chaos that's going to happen, and then eventually the powers that are left behind are going to start to regain control over sections of areas, and eventually those sections will get larger and larger, and they'll encompass more and more, and it'll start to look more and more like a city, and then a state, and then like a territory. And so I don't think the United States is going to come back. I don't know what will be called after that, but I think that this country that we're in right now has so many resources that the rest of the world is not just going to ignore. It's going to be like somebody drove a Mercedes, packed to the gill with all sorts of goodies inside, and drove it into Fifth Ward, and then left it running, or took the keys out and opened the doors and just left it sitting there. I mean, people are going to come and just strip that car down to its frame, um, because of all the value. So the whoever's left here behind is going to have to try and regain control fairly quickly, because other nations are going to be eyeballing the open doors and open windows here in the U.S. So um, I think a lot of what we're seeing with what Trump is doing, and I think if you look at it in this light, and I can't remember where I heard it, maybe it was Glenn Beck or somebody, and I thought, man, that makes a lot of sense. But if you think about everything that Trump is doing, he's preparing for war. I think he sees a war coming, and I think he sees it. Maybe he's being advised that this thing is coming, is inevitable. There's no way to turn the direction from the conflict that's about to come. So I think he's getting ready for that. So he's bringing all the resources back to the U.S. He's bringing the manufacturing back to the U.S. He wants control over the Panama Canal. He wants control over the Arctic passageway around Greenland. I think he senses that there is something massive on the horizon coming, and he doesn't know that it's the rapture, but I think he senses, or he's being instructed that China and Russia may team up, or or conflict may break out in the Pacific at the same time things escalate in the European front. So now the U.S. is back to the World War II model, where we have to have a fight a two front theater. So I think that's what he's looking at, and he's preparing for that. And people don't understand, but he's not telling people either, right? He's not going out saying, "Hey, we got to get ready for war." No, I think he's quietly trying to shore up the infrastructure here for what's coming. And I don't think he's starting the war. I just think that, he sees that that's it. There's no other way around it. Um, so yeah, but back to the conspiracy thing. I it's a very That's very dangerous information, and I don't mean to say that in the sense that it should be banned or anything like that. But I think for certain mindsets that when you expose them to certain information, it has a way to permanently imprint itself on their minds, and then you cannot convince them otherwise. And people have that idea about flat Earth, and if you don't believe in the flat Earth, then you are part of the conspiracy, and then you're really paid for by the Rockefellers and blah blah blah. And I mean, it's just on and on and on. Um, I mean, I don't want to go through every one of them, but that's just an example. But once you heard that guy, right? You heard him on that video. You can't reason with people like that. Their mind is gone, and it is, in my opinion, it is satanic, and it's even worse when you have Christians claiming this, and it's kind of tacitly done within the major denominations in the form of replacement theology, um, and obviously it's growing in popularity obviously in the left side of politics, but now even in the right with the introduction with all these conspiracies. And I think it's I it just kills me when I hear people like that because you can't reason with them, and it makes me sad for them. Okay, and I think there's one more. The cosmic signs and wonders obviously are not anything that we can do, but obviously in the seal judgments, the sixth seal, uh, is a very terrifying cosmic event that happens inside of the 70th week. We are not seeing anything like that, but we're getting all these like fascinating astronomical alignments that haven't appeared for thousands of years, and or they line up with certain things in a way that hasn't been done in thousands of years. Obviously, the blood moon tetrads. I mean, if Israel wasn't a nation again, it wouldn't really have any meaning other than the fact that it falls on those dates. But the fact that Israel is back in our land, and there's a great push now that they have a political recognition of the city, their capital city of Jerusalem, um, that they've regained territory in the Golan Heights, even into Syria now because of the collapse of Syria and all the gains that they've made with Gaza. I think they're done with Gaza. They're just, hey, give us all the hostages or else. And they're at that stage. They're done. And I think Gaza's done. And I don't know what comes after, but I think that whole, it's not going to go back to the way it was. Um, and all of that, we see echoes of what's coming. Those horses aren't here, but we can hear their galloping hoofbeats in the distance. And I don't know, I just kind of categorized it in these ways, but to me, it's interesting to start to see all of this stuff come into place, and how the four horsemen, every one of those issues, there is a solution. And it is some type of biometric solution is putting technology into the human body. So, all right. Oh man, that was right at an hour. It's pretty good. Usually I'm pretty long-winded, or more long-winded than I normally am. All right. Duct tape forever. Yeah, and look, I know there's been a lot of shady stuff that's happened in our recent history, a lot. And I think there's a lot of truth in things that people expose. I just think that when you only consume that, you keep going further and further and further, and the further you keep digging into it, ultimately you find some type of like anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish bent to whatever. It was the Rockefeller, or the Rothschilds. It was this. It was, yeah. There were a lot of shady, wealthy Jewish philosophers, philanthropists, businessmen, tycoons, whatever. But there's a lot of shady, wicked, evil Gentile tycoons and philanthropists and philosophers and stuff. I mean, wickedness isn't specifically defined to one ethnicity. I mean, it's all of us. Every culture has had evil, wicked people running things and doing things, and the powers behind the thrones. All of that. Every empire has had that. So I I I just like I think that we had this great victory in 2024. The left, um, or even before that, really with October 7th, 2023, we started to see this getting exposed. But we see the inroads that anti-Semitism has made into legitimate conspiracy theories. That there's been a lot of conspiracy theories that became conspiracy facts. I did a presentation on that and talked about 10 of the biggest ones that people thought were just conspiracy theories, and then it turns out they really happened. And there's all sorts of documentation to verify that these things were legitimate government programs. But I just I see that section of our larger community, as they begin to go into conspiracy and they get sucked into it, it just ultimately leads them to where Candace Owens is. It leads them to where Tucker Carlson is. It leads them, to these places, Ian Carroll and all these guys that are spot on a lot of things, but somehow they get tied into these. It's all the Jews. The Jews are to blame. That's their bottom line. So, and interestingly, and this is just my theory on this. You don't have to believe it, but I know in the seven letters to the seven churches. Let me read that. There's two instances where the synagogue of Satan is used, and it's used with the church in, I believe, Smyrna. And look here, look how it's flipped, how it's reversed, right? And it says here, and it's to the letter of church in Smyrna, verse 9, chapter 2 says, I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Now, when you go over to the church of Philadelphia, so both of these churches had nothing negative to, Christ had nothing negative to say about them. Okay. Um, all the other churches had good and bad things to say, and then one church had nothing good to say about Laodicea. But here in Revelation 3, and let me see here, 3:9. So in 2:9, it was to the church in Smyrna who was, again, had nothing negative to say. Christ had nothing negative to say. It says, I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Now, reading 3:9, it says, Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet and to know that I have loved you. So that phrase is flipped around. And so I think with regard to, if I hold to the view that these seven churches were real churches in John's day, but they all also, because of the order that they're put in the fact that we have hindsight, we can look back and see how these churches also corresponded with the church ages over the last 2,000 years. I think the first iteration of this with Smyrna was the Judaizers, these people that were going around trying to um, convert Christians back into Judaism. And I think Christ was referring to them as the synagogue of Satan, because now they're trying to draw people away from the true faith and make them twice the sons of hell. You remember he accused them of that the Pharisees in, I want to say, in Matthew 23. And then in Revelation 3:9, talking to the church of Philadelphia, again, if I'm holding to this consistency of interpretation, so now the instead of it being the early church, now we're talking about the later church. So from the 1700s on till today, you have those who say they are the Jews but lie, or that, let me reread that. It says, "We have those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie." I think these folks, because if I'm talking about from the 1700s going forward, I'm talking about the people that have begun to embrace the the heresy of replacement theology, that the church has replaced Israel. And I know that the replacement theology has existed for a lot longer. I mean, it's been there since, you know, the Romans, destroyed Jerusalem, but it's become a very, very pervasive, because it used to just be within the Catholic Church. Then once the Protestant Reformation happened, and then you have all these new denominations that are coming forward, they just kind of carried over the same eschatology from Roman Catholic, which initially was amillennial. Some of that changed to postmillennial with certain denominations, but either postmillennial or amillennial, they both have a very corrupted and perverted view of who the Jews are, and they think that the church has now totally supplanted Israel, and that Israel has no more role to play. And obviously, Scripture argues very strongly against that idea. So, but so yeah, I think first century, talking about the Judaizers, and then the last, this last second to last church, we're talking about replacement theology, because it says they'll come to make you worship before their feet. I mean, that means to be that they're in the same place. It seems like, I don't know if that's here on earth or in heaven or where the place is, but it just seems like it's two different groups, but they're doing the same kind of sin. They're both corrupting the pure faith, the true faith. So, all right, questions. Let's go. And let's see. Thank you, mods, for grabbing all these. That's a lot. May the fifth be with you. Thank you, Sir Pierce. Uh, Donna, question: Is Diego Garcia named in honor of Pete's helicopter flights? uh, I no, I don't think so. And the Navy doesn't think highly of. And correct me if I'm wrong. If you're in the Navy out there, you can correct me. But my understanding is that the Navy doesn't think highly of helicopter pilots. And when they think of pilots, they're thinking of jet pilots like Tom Cruise and those guys. Helicopters are kind of like, we're the slow movers. And I think, to my knowledge too, I don't think any helicopters could like fly off and land from Diego Garcia without some massive internal fuel blivets or something. So no, no, it wasn't named after me. Thank you though. Caterlin, I'm sorry. Thank you, Caterlin. This is from questions from Patrick. Question: When God incarnated, did Jesus have the body and soul of a human, but the Spirit of God only, limited by those faculties, or the spirit of a man also? Well, as I told Tom Hughes in my very first interview on YouTube, I reserve the right to say I don't know. And the incarnation is one of those mysteries that we really, I don't, I mean, we may understand it in heaven, but I certainly I know many greater theologians than I have tackled this question. So the only thing I can proffer is my opinion. Um, so I think that, and again, and I am not the expert on the incarnation. This is just how I understand it. So when the Holy Spirit, the angel Gabriel came and told Mary, "Hey, you're gonna be with child," and she's like, "Well, I've never been with a man," and so he's like, "No, the Holy Spirit's gonna come and overshadow you, and you know, you're gonna have this child. He's gonna be the Son of God, the Messiah." The Holy Spirit did overshadow her, and she was impregnated supernaturally with that divine action. Let's just call it that. I mean, it wasn't how we normally do it. you know, to the Mormon chagrin. I think the Mormons believe that that actually physically happened, but no. So God made it supernaturally happen, and I think that Jesus had the body of a man. He had the soul of a man, which is your mental faculties. It's what makes you you. If you think about the Clarence Larkin diagram of the body, soul, and spirit, and that he had the Holy Spirit in him. Uh, and then also at the baptism, obviously it was that was a demonstration of the anointing of Jesus' mission there, but publicly in a public way, so everybody could see it. Um, so he had to have a real body in order to really die on the cross and to really feel the pain and really sweat blood in all the things that Jesus experienced, hungered, thirst, etc. In the soul of a man, his what makes me me. I mean, if my soul were not in my body, I would be in a coma. If I were still alive, but my soul were not, it were somehow separated from the flesh, I would be comatose. So I would be alive, but I'm not there. The lights are on, but nobody's home. Like I'm completely not there. So there is some type of separation between the soul and the physical corporal body. Now, as regard to the spirit, I believe that everybody is born with this God imprint on their conscience, right? And that's meant to drive them to fill that gap, that God shaped hole in them with God, right? It's meant to connect you and draw you to God, and everybody's got that. And so when people live wickedly and they live in such a state of sin and rebellion against God, God sears that conscience, right? He begins to sear their conscience so that they can't change out of that. Um, Pharaoh, for instance, right? But but so that he had a physical body. I think he had the mental faculties of a man, but he also had God, the spirit in him. He is still God. So if you could think about it in a way that doesn't make sense to humans or to our logical minds, he's 100% of both. He's not 50% God, 50% man, but he was fully God and fully man at the same time. And again, I can't pretend to understand that in its truest sense. I'm probably not doing justice to the explanation of it, but it's just the in order for him to experience, when it talks in Hebrews that he was tested in all ways like us, he would fully have to be a human, and that encompasses having this the soul, the mind of of how a man is, but he was also fully God. So it's not an easy thing to wrap your mind around, for sure. But in a way, all of us, when you get to you when you before the age of accountability, I believe that you have kind of like a loner, if I can put it that way. It's something that God covers you with, if you died before that age, right? And my position on this. I'm not going to hold strictly to the age of 20, but I think that in Scripture, the only age that we are given is those. It's separated at the age of 20, those below the age of 20, and those above it. And beyond that, we don't really have any particular ages. But let's just say that it's that. And at the age of 19, that person, regardless of whether they deserve it or not, are covered. But when they turn 20, that coverage is gone, insurance coverage. And now they're of age, their mind is developed, right? Prefrontal cortex, and they are capable of making decisions and now are going to be held responsible for making those eternal decisions on what they do with God. And obviously, God knows when they're going to die, when their last breath is, and He's going to orchestrate things in their life so that that they don't have any excuse when if they reject him, they don't have any way to say, "Well, I didn't know." And he's like, "Yeah, you did know. Here." He's going to show you those points in your life. But at that point, you have that God-shaped hole with nothing in it, and so people begin to try to fill that thing with that hole with what they think logically they need. So I need a good job. I need to get an education. I need to get an education. I need to get a good job. I need to make this kind of salary. I need to be in this position or doing this kind of thing. And I need to learn this skill set. Or, that's kind of best case scenario. Worst case is like they begin to fill it with drugs and alcohol and sex and things that are just going to rapidly reduce the lifespan by decades. Um, and you will never drink enough. You'll never smoke enough. You'll never eat enough. You'll never make enough money. You'll never date enough beautiful women or have enough nice things to fill that hole in your inside of you. The only thing that can fill that is God, because only God can fill that. So I think at that point, we all are moving along in life trying to find that whatever that purpose is for who we are and what we do and why we are why we are. And that's what drives us to fill that hole with something, because we think by doing this, it gives my life meaning. It means this, it means that, or a sense of accomplishments. We all want to feel like we've accomplished something. We all want to feel like we're here for a reason, for a purpose. And apart from God, I mean, I know there's people that have died atheists that have contributed to the world, medicines or discoveries or whatnot. Um, it just isn't worth it. Eternity is not worth anything this world or this life can offer you. And I know that, if we can use an economic example about investing, I mean, we have multi-trillion dollar industries all wrapped around making more little green paper ours, you know, and or Bitcoin or whatever, stocks and bonds. It's all about getting wealth and getting as much as we can in this life. And we have no guarantee of tomorrow. We have no guarantee that we'll be able to even spend a dollar of that money. Um, and yet people will trade all of eternity for so little trinkets. Even if you were to possess all the gold in the world, I mean, what does heaven pave its roads with? It's paved with golds. It's gold. It's just you're collecting like road. So I would much rather invest in people, because the only thing you can take with you to heaven is other people. And so that to me is far more a wise investment than anything the world's going to offer you. Now, there are good things in the world. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love not industries, but organizations and groups and people that take care of abandoned animals or abused animals. Like I think that's one of the higher callings in this world, to defend those that can't defend themselves. And that goes along with children. That goes along with widows and disadvantaged, etc. I just feel like those are higher callings than simply accumulating more trinkets and cars and trophy wives or whatever the case is. With that said, I completely went way off topic. I point is, he was fully God, fully man. I tend to think, because of how he had to suffer and that he did suffer, that his body was obviously real. I want to say his mind and how he had to reckon and struggle with being a man was also there, human, but he was also God through and through. And I don't know how to explain it beyond that. So, okay. Kathy the Italian. Uh, so how close are we to the rapture? I mean, any day could be the last day. And whether we go to him ahead of time and we get a one-on-one escort, with the Lord, or we come down with a group or go up with a group. Um, we know we're in the season. We know it's soon. We know it's coming soon. I don't know a specific day or year even, but we know it's soon. Um, if you want somebody that'll tell you a specific date, I'm sure there's probably a lot of YouTube channels out there that will give you a specific date. I don't, I wouldn't bet on those dates, but I mean, if you want a date, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that will give you that. Sammy Thompson, question: is God delaying the rapture, or will it happen, ready or not? Well, I do think he's delaying events a little bit. Perhaps, what Peter was talking about in Second Peter, that he's long suffering and that he doesn't want anybody to suffer, to go to hell. But I do think that um, I do think that had Satan had his druthers, we would have had Hillary Clinton in 2016, and she would have still been in power today, or would have transferred to somebody just as evil as she is. And we would be in a far, far different world than what I think Scripture tells us. So I don't know if it's delayed necessarily, but maybe he's tweaking things in a way that um, gives the max amount of time for people to come to salvation, if that makes sense. So it could have went this way, it could have went that way, but maybe the prayers of enough people were such that he had mercy, like he had mercy on Nineveh, when they repented after Jonah. And I know that our whole nation has repented. I get that. And I know that Israel is far from being what God's called her to be. Um, but you can't tell me that it doesn't feel like we're living in some form of alternate reality right now with everything that's happened with Trump. I mean, that alone, it just feels like, I mean, I'm glad it turned out the way it did. But it feels kind of like we're in the twilight zone a little bit. Nothing. He is so anti-status quo that it feels like we've been so used to the status quo our whole lives. We're not used to something like this, and it's total disruption. So I do think it's a little bit of an extension. I don't think it's not enough, obviously, to change the timeline and everything that he's operating on, God's operating on. But I happen to think that this is a little bit of an extension for us to get more people in as much as we can. Go out to the highways and the byways and tell who we can that the storms come in and get safe with Christ. Come to know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and believe on His finished work, so that recognizing that you can't pay for your own sins, no matter how good you are. You're never going to be good enough. You're never going to live perfectly enough. I mean, Paul, the apostle, the greatest of the apostles in Romans 7, says he struggles with sin. If he's going to struggle with sin, you and I are going to struggle with sin. That's just the way it is. The bodies that we talked about, these tripartite bodies, body, soul, spirit, the flesh and the spirit are constantly at odds with each other, and they're constantly battling um, over who's going to gain dominance in that person's life. Is the flesh going to gain dominance, or is the spirit? I think for most of it's kind of like it goes back and forth depending on the day. So, Talia, question: will the bulls and seals during the tribulation be back to back, or will there be a period of calm in between? That's a good question. I've addressed this a couple of different ways, but I I struggle with this because you have the judgments, so you have John is caught up to heaven in chapter 4. He's immediately in the throne room scene, or he's seeing it from afar, and then the next thing you know, in chapter 5, he's like kind of closer, and he's seeing this massive throng of people worshiping, and these strange creatures in the middle, these cherubim angels. and some angel announces who is worthy to take the scroll from the right hand of the Father, and nobody. I mean, silence. And they looked everywhere, below the earth, above the earth, throughout everywhere. There's nobody, and then appears Christ, like the Lion of the tribe of Judah, but also appearing like a lamb slaughtered. Right. So it's, I don't know how to describe that other than to read what it, just to quote what it says, but he is the only one. And that's why I wholeheartedly reject pre-wrath or post-trib or any other type of view that puts the church inside of the 70th week of Daniel. There's a lot of good reasons, but one of my favorites is like who's causing this judgments. It's not Satan. Satan is not causing these judgments to happen. The Antichrist is not causing them to happen. Jesus is. He goes up, takes the scroll, and he begins to open them. And as he opens them, these horsemen ride out, these first four horsemen. And I think they ride the duration of the 70th week, but they ride forth. And the thing is that where Christ is doing this is in heaven, in the throne room, which exists outside of time. So I don't know if they're back to back or if he opens them like this. And as he's doing it, these guys are riding forth, these spirits or whatever are riding forth and being unleashed upon the earth. I don't know if they happen back to back in heaven, but as they hit our reality, they come into this dimension. Now there's things like time. And so I don't know how that is injected into time. I don't know if they appear back to back to back. It seems like they're spread out a little bit over time, but hard to say. I don't think and I don't think they are opened yet. But I think what we're seeing now is kind of the preview to what's coming. All right, good question. Thank you. Another one from Talia. Will people who become saved during the tribulation still lose their life to God's wrath or just via the Antichrist? Well, I think in some regards, um, they're going to still suffer under the judgments in terms of like a massive earthquake, and they're standing in the wrong place and they're going to die, but they're immediately, caught up or taken up, their spirits taken up, and they're seen below the throne or in front of the throne waving the palm branches, and they're asking the Lord how much longer until they're avenged. So I do think the majority of those at the beginning, at the outset, are going to be martyred by the Antichrist. We see that in Revelation 13:7, that the whole world's given over to him, and the tribulate and these martyrs, these saints are going to be martyred mercilessly. So without a doubt, the majority is going to come from that. But I don't see anywhere else other than there's a passage in Revelation 7. Let me see. But I think it's talking about the Jews, the 144,000 from the tribe of Judah, or not from Judah, from the 12 tribes. The 144,000s are the ones that are being sealed. If you hold to like the Left Behind idea, that Christians also were sealed, not Christians, but the saints, tribulation saints, were also sealed supernaturally on their forehead, then I could see that they are being protected. But I I think that there's a certain number of Gentiles that will be survived or allowed to survive through, and those will be supernaturally sealed. What number that is, I don't know. We know that Adam and Eve started the civilization out with two people. Noah and his family, obviously his sons. He had three pairs of couples having children. So I think any number above those is going to, from the Gentiles' perspective, is going to be used to kickstart the population again inside of the kingdom age. And maybe it's kind of like the ark in the sense that there's a certain groups of each type of people, ethnicity, culture, whatever, language, that are preserved through, so that when they go on the other side of the sheep and goat judgment and the introduction into the kingdom, or the renovation in the world becoming prepared to be the kingdom of Christ, that every representative of every tribe and tongue is still going to be living into the kingdom age. So at some point in the tribulation, they get they come to faith in Christ, they're sealed, and then God spares them, but only a certain number. And then there's still others who come to faith and are believers, but they are not sealed, and they're just having to kind of suffer through um, the rugged landscape that is going to be the 7 year tribulation. And I would imagine some of them will probably die in terms of just the severity of the judgments that are happening. So I don't know. It's hard to say. In other words, yes, the majority of saints inside of the tribulation will be killed by the Antichrist. And yes, there will also be a percentage of Gentiles. We know that Jews are going to be preserved, but there's a certain number of Gentiles, percentage of them that will be saved, that will go on to populate inside of the kingdom age physically in their physical mortal bodies. As for the rest of those, I think kind of they might be collateral damage in terms of the judgments. I don't know that they're I don't think they're the ones that are gone after by the locust, the demonic locust. There's certain things like that I think they're protected from, but earthquakes, massive fires, the just this collapse of society. I don't know that they're all spared. Okay, that where were we? Sarah, Tennessee, if government can now impact time and space, how do you think that will impact the rapture? I don't think government can impact time and space right now. We don't have that kind of ability. In fact, the one thing I don't think that mankind is going to be able, at least in the time that we have, not be able to crack the code on time, like time travel, things like that. I don't think we'll ever do that. And I also know that, I think it's in Jeremiah 31, but it talks about, that the Jews will remain a nation as long as the sun shines and the moon, gives reflects the light of the sun, and it talks about kind of the permanence of the earth. So the Jews will remain a nation, and then also God also qualifies it and says, well, if they can, you know, explore the depths of the earth or the heavens, then Israel will cease to be a nation from before me. And we can't even get below. We really can't even dig below the crust. I mean, I know Russia, the U.S., and some other places have tried to do these dig to the center of the earth kind of things. They can't get very far. And then, obviously the we don't even know most of what's in the ocean, um, and let alone what's in space. So yeah, I think if mankind were going to be around for, let's say that, Christ wasn't coming back, or the second coming, none of that was going to happen. Let's just say time was going to go on and on and on. We probably within about 150 years, we might have figured it out how to do it safely. Because again, you go back to Genesis 11, and God says to himself, talking to the Trinity, that if man remains united in purpose, there's not anything they can't figure out. And they'll figure it out. But what we've been able to do with technology is they know mathematically, or they know that it's theoretically possible that we can create a wormhole to travel through, to go from point A to point B. You know, the straight line used to be the fastest way. Now it's just going to be this wormhole. You could be in Washington D.C. and you've got a meeting in Paris, so they adjust the Stargate or whatever it is, and you step through and you're in Paris. I mean, it's going to kill the airline industry, but you know, it is what it is. But it's theoretically possible in the same way that Einstein and others figured out mathematically that uh, nuclear fission was possible. And so once they got the math straight, and then they could start working on the technology, well, I think we're way further along than they were. Plus, we have modern systems that can aggregate and decipher and computate, etc. Vast amounts of data, way faster than anything that they could have done in the 20th century. So yeah, I don't think we're there yet. So I don't think it has any impact on the rapture. Aldo, question: if everyone is in debt, where did all that money go? That is a great question. Probably in people's bunkers. The cartels and all these criminal networks that have billions of dollars in cash, they're not going to be happy when everything goes to Bitcoin or whatever, digital currencies. Karen, question: if Jesus' blood was found on the Ark of the Covenant, could Satan do something with it to cause abomination? I know it's a crazy question. Uh, you know, I don't know much about the Shroud of Turin. Like, I don't know if they've checked to see if it has DNA on there anywhere. Because if it was wrapped around his body or his face and his body, you would think that there'd be some kind of DNA. But I don't know. I mean, it's 2,000 years ago, so obviously, whatever evidence like that would have existed may have dried up a long time ago or something. Not been usable by the time it comes to our age. Um, No, honestly, I don't. I think that we had other things like the spear of destiny that supposedly was a spear that pierced Christ's side, and that's been floating around uh, supernatural circles and people that hunt after that sort of stuff for millennia. And best guess is the spear, the actual spear itself, was just lost to antiquity. Now, there's also theory about the centurion that stabbed Christ in the side. I think his name was Longinus, and the theory goes is that he had something. He had an eye problem. Like he had one of his eyes was he was losing eyesight, or he had issues with his eyes, but he was still experienced enough to serve as a centurion. But anyways, he was the guy below Christ. And when they gave him the instruction to check and see if he was dead, he was the one that, when he speared Christ's side, all of that blood and water and all that fluid from the piercing or the stabbing shot on his face, and you see it in the Passion. You'll see that scene where he stabs it, and supposedly that made his eyesight. It fixed. It healed his eyes. At that moment, he became a believer, and he goes on to sharing the gospel, and he gets captured by the Romans for deserting, and they said, well, look, you're telling everybody that Christ healed your eyes, and so they gouge his eyes out, so he's going around still blind but still telling people about Jesus. And then they get so angry with him, they cut his tongue off, and he's still able to talk perfectly and still share the gospel. So finally, after that, they kill him. They cut his head off. Now uh, that's a story. I don't know if it's true or not. We know there was a centurion that stabbed Jesus. Uh, so I don't know. I would imagine that if anybody were to convert right on the spot, it would be that guy. So there's a lot of possible truth behind that, but these stories sometimes get embellished a little bit. from angel, how does all these things that are being set up now to be used in the B system fit into be useful with all the judgments that will be happening at the same time? Well, you know, like us, Satan is not omnipotent and he's not omniscient. So he doesn't know when the rapture is going to happen either. And it's interesting to me that when you look at the second coming, so much of that was tied to timing and to you would know exactly when the Messiah would be there if you studied the scriptures. You would know that Christ would have had to the Palm Sunday would had to have been in the neighborhood of the 483rd year, and if you were to date it back to Nehemiah chapter 2, when Artaxerxes gives Nehemiah the order and the decree to go forth and restore the city and the walls, you could calculate from that date 483 years, and then you would have the ballpark window of when the Messiah would be there. And if you were thinking about it, like, okay, so the Messiah is supposed to be presented as the Messiah here. Is he presented as a baby, or is he presented as a boy, or is he presented as a man? Going back to the Leviticus, in order to serve in the temple, I think you had to be the age of 30. So there was an age requirement on that. So it makes sense that Christ's ministry would begin around the age of 30, um, but also leave it ambiguous enough to not know exactly when he was born or exactly when the crucifixion would happen with any pinpoint accuracy. You'll hear people saying Christ died on 2030, or they died in the year 30 AD, and they'll give you concrete reasons why they think why. Somebody else will give you concrete reasons for 31, 32, 33. So there's a lot of there's a little bit of wiggle room for Jesus. You would know roughly the time frame when he should be alive. And but with regard to the rapture, it's not tied to any signs. Paul described it as being imminent in his day, and he wasn't wrong because he didn't know. And if he did claim to know, then he would be claiming some type of knowledge that he wouldn't know simply as an apostle. And likewise, it's been imminent every single generation because no generation's known, you know, when the rapture was going to happen. But now that here we are 20 centuries later, and just like it was prophesied, Israel became a nation again, brought back as a nation again a second time. You can see that in Isaiah 11 and Amos 9, 14, and 15, where they would never be removed from their land again. So obviously, that can't be talking about any time before 1948. It could only pertain to anything after 1948, which now that the Jews are back in the land, the big to do now across Christendom is to deny that they're the real Jews. That doesn't make any sense. I know that Hitler was satanically possessed to kill the Jews. He was not satanically possessed to kill people pretending to be Jews. He was satanically possessed to kill the Jews, and Satan was not messing around when he used the Third Reich to do that. So those people came out of the Holocaust, and they had children, and they're still Jews in Europe and Africa and all over the place. And slowly but surely, they're coming back to their land because they're seeing that more and more where they live is not safe anymore, even in the United States. So I think this time is a little bit of an extension time for us. It's also a little bit of a shoring up time for Israel because they're about to go into the 7 hard years. And if we're going to do any parallels back to Joseph, the 7 fat years, 7 lean years, we're going into the lean years here as soon as 1 second after the rapture is going to start. From Richard Browder, question: do you think the Catholic Church will elect a pope more progressive than Francis? I do. Well, he will be as progressive because he would have been somebody by now. Francis came into the papacy in 2014, so he would have had time to seed his conclaves and all the other things with people that were like him. He would have weeded out people that were not as progressive as he was, um, and he would have surrounded himself with a lot of like-minded progressives. So the guy, I can't remember his name. I can't say it off the top of my head. It starts with an A, Olivatory or something. I don't know, but it's really hard to say who's going to get it. But I have my put my penny candy down and on this particular papal candidate, this Mikolai Beachov. He's young. He looks like Zelensky's like doppelganger. I mean, he looks a lot like Zelensky. But I don't know. I like him. I know he was also an acolyte of Francis, so you know he could be the surprise guy. They'll put somebody out front like, oh yeah, that guy's he's got it, and then you never know. So it's whoever Satan is going to throw in, and Satan realizes he may not have much longer, so he's going to put in somebody that he can use. Okay. Catherine Cole, when the dead in Christ rise first, does that mean if we have an urn of a loved one, we'll see them go? It's possible. I don't think they're gonna like explode out of the urn or anything like that. Honestly, I don't know how it's gonna look because you've got people coming out of the ocean that died in the ocean. Their bodies are scattered all over the seabed. Just little specks of dust now coming back together. Um, you've got people obviously that were cremated. You've got people that there nothing left of them, fragments of bones buried under rubble and mountains, and I mean they're going to come out too. I mean the urn would not, if somebody exploded out of an urn, that would not be the, I'm promising you, it would not be the weirdest thing that happens when that happens. There's going to be, I'm sure there's going to be some crazy stories in and of that itself in that event, just that one moment. Kathy Marie, question: do you think God is waiting for a specific date or the last person that needs to accept Jesus into his body before he calls us home? Jack Kelly of the Grace Through Faith website, that one of our great Bible teachers over the years, prophecy teachers, he he thought it was a specific number of Gentiles, and that number was known only to God, so we have no idea what that would be. And I think that there's some merit to that. Um, I also think that last Gentile believer could also be converted on a day that has significance as well. And my thoughts. I'm not a proponent. I'm a big fan of Tish B'Av rapture, not because it has any tie-ins with any of the feast or anything to do with the Jewish people or Israel, but because if it happened on that date, it would be a date that stood out to them, and their ears would perk up, and they're like, "Whoa, that just happened on Tish B'Av." So I don't know. It could be that last Gentile converts on them, whatever Tish B'Av that is, and that's the date. So some others see new wine, some see Pentecost, the traditional Pentecost, some see Feast of Trumpets. I mean, and I just know we're close. Okay, from Sarah, Tennessee. My English Hebrew Tanakh in Psalm 144:5 says, Hashem bend your heavens and descend. Do you think that time is a construct, that is the time space continuum? Yeah, I think time is a construct. And I think it was Kent Hovind that made the really good illustration about you can't have, um, I can't do it as good as he does, but you can't have like time without space. You can't have space without you can't. These things are all related together: time, space, um, like length, width, height, depth, the measurements and how we construct our reality around us, plus time. I think they all have to kind of exist at the same time in order for that to work. So I think God can bend time. Obviously, if you think back to Joshua, when God made the sun stand still for them to fight that battle, and that obviously threw the earth off or would throw the time off that we now currently live under some kind of a situation. And there was another instance, I think, in Isaiah where there was another instance where I think Chuck Misser posited that the earth was knocked on its tilt at that point. I don't know. Um, and I think I don't fully understand eternity either. I've heard it explained as forever and ever. We see that in scripture. And I had a very lengthy conversation with an old college buddy who was devout Seventh day Adventist. We argued this point ad nauseum. I'm like, dude, forever and ever means forever and ever. But if you go back into Hebrew and you look at, I'm like, no, smarter men than you and I have long since known that this is what it means. But it could also mean simply the absence of time. But we know time is in play in Revelation 22, 21, I think, or 22, where it talks about the leaves that align the river that give healing for the nations, and their fruit changes every month. Or so there's some kind of time going forward. So I don't know. Time is a weird concept in regard to that's the only reality we understand now, but we also understand there's a reality that doesn't exist in time. And so for us, that's a hard concept to grasp if we really want to look into it. And so my issue has always been when we go back and forth, like when somebody goes up to heaven or they come back, or um, you know, John's caught up to heaven. He sees everything he sees, and then he goes back to Patmos. Was that only a minute that he was gone? Was that a second? Was that a year? We don't know, like how long he was gone for from Patmos. That's a good Tom Hughes question. I think I'm going to ask him and get his take on that. Just remind me to ask him that question. He's going to be like, "What?" um, he likes it when I give him hard questions. Watch, ma'am. Do you think we'll visually see the dead in Christ go first? I So my thoughts on the rapture in all of, I guess, the last couple of questions. I kind of see it. Um, I look at Daniel and Daniel. I want to say it's Daniel 11 or Daniel 10, where he's by the river and he sees the man above the river and he sees the two other angels. I think they're just called men, but they're on each side of the river, and the guys that were with Daniel couldn't see what he was seeing, but they could hear, and they were just immediately frightened and trembling and running away. Same thing with Paul. When Paul was on the road to Damascus, or Saul was on the road to Damascus, and he had that bright light blinded him, and he heard, but I don't. The people around him knew something crazy was happening, and they ran off. But like they didn't hear what he heard, or I don't know that they saw what Daniel saw. So I think they'll know something is happening or happened. I don't think they're going to understand it unless they've watched channels like this or been exposed to the idea of the rapture, or they physically see it in front of them, like they see somebody disappearing, which I think will be a huge, that'll be a large percentage of what happens. But I don't think just, I don't know that they'll see the dead in Christ rise up and all that kind of stuff. I think they'll know something is going on, and I think it will terrify them. And I don't think they're really going to fully understand unless they've been exposed to the idea of the rapture and they see somebody disappear in front of them. So I think all they will see is just people disappearing. I don't think they're going to see like us in our glorified bodies necessarily. It would be cool if that happened. I think maybe more people convert because they see a transformation like that. But we also know that in Revelation 11, the two witnesses, they're dead in the street and they're in the streets for 3.5 days. And then they hear a voice from heaven and they both stand up and then they're caught up to heaven in front of in front of the world and presumably in front of media, people filming it and cameras and stuff like that. So that's more of a obvious rapture, and I think that's given the timing of when it happens. So much supernatural stuff is going to be happening already that their departure is it's going to be just like one more thing that they are experiencing that is just way beyond normal, you know, the normal reality. Joe's on. Hey, Joe. Heather Lee, question: any suggestions on how to make sure my Catholic family are truly saved? I I don't know that there's a one size shoe fits all kind of thing in approaching a Catholic. I think if you approach a younger Catholic that's not been in it as long, the draw or the when something gets imprinted on you so because you do it so often, it's just kind of like your muscle memory. There's a muscle memory within the doing of things within Roman Catholicism that is cathartic. I mean, you feel like you're doing something good when you're making the sign of the cross or doing your rosary beads or confessing to a priest or whatever, reciting things. And there's comfort in that because there's familiar I can't say that word, familiarity with those things that make you feel safe and they make you feel good and they make you feel like you're connected. And I've met a couple of Catholics. Well, I met a lot of Catholics, but I've met two kinds of Catholics, I should say. I've met the Catholics that are equate salvation and equate their spirituality with their Catholicism. But then I've met Catholics that are very much uh, love Jesus and and are all about Jesus, and they care more about Jesus than they care about the Catholic Church. But because of family, constraints or whatever, choice of options or whatever, they want to keep the family all going to the same church together. They still attend a Catholic church. So I don't know. I've met Catholics that are on fire for the Lord, and I've met Catholics that are just religious. And I could say the same thing with Protestants. I've met Protestants that are on fire for the Lord, and I met Protestants that were religious and equated their righteousness with how many times they attended church, or did they wear a suit to church, or did how much money did they give, or were they baptized in water? Were they, um, you know, uh, married? Never divorced. They didn't drink. Never smoked, etc. I think so to get back to your question, I think the way to approach them would be to go as the Lord leads, and if nothing else, you plant seeds, but He may lead you to, and you're saying your Catholic family, I'm assuming parents, brothers, sisters, husband, children, wife, I think you're sorry, husband or cousins. I don't know how big a family you're talking about, but Let the Lord lead you. Make sure that people know. I had a friend of mine that I thought for sure we were just talking about what comes after and going to heaven and stuff. And he's a devout Catholic. His son is actually a priest, and I knew him to love God and love Jesus. I mean, that's just how he carried himself. But when it came to that question about where he was going to go after he died, he was uncertain. And I was like, dude, what do you mean? How could you not know where you're going after you die? He goes, well, he's still looking at his his salvation is somehow tied to whether how good he is or not. So I don't know. I mean, it's like anybody else. If I said all my family were Episcopalians or Methodist, or I would say the same thing if all my family were Southern Baptist or anything, because it's an individual decision everybody has to make, and we aren't saved simply because of where we attend church and stuff. So I think you would treat them like you would treat anybody else in that regard. You know, when the Lord opens that door for you to share the gospel, share it with them. I don't know how free you are to talk about other things around them. Um, I know sometimes in families like that, it's hard to bring these subjects up because it's been so divisive and nobody wants to go there, and it just gets shut down real quick. So uh, just go as the Lord leads on that one. Um, but be open about what you believe and why you believe it, and let them see your confidence in your salvation, and let your light shine. And I think, like my buddy Josh, when I had him on about a month or so ago, I mean, he was hardcore Catholic when we had that lunch that one time, and we hadn't seen each other in 5 years. And then we go to lunch, and I'm just on fire for the Lord. This is after my kind of conversion, and I'm just explaining everything. And then we ate lunch. We came back. We sat in the parking lot for another hour talking. And at the end of it, it was just like he's looking at me like, "Who are you?" But I planted a seed, you know, and somewhere down the road, it bore fruit. And then they left the Catholic Church. They found another church to worship, and they've fully departed from the Catholic faith and are now in a healthy relationship in a healthy church. They themselves healthy believers. So it's not impossible. I'm just saying that you have to be bold, let the Lord lead, and but I don't think you would treat them any differently than if they were all Methodist or all whatever. I mean, anyways, okay. Another question. What does Pete think these orbs are? We also get shafts of light caught by our trail cams. I think, well, I think the little orbs that you see floating around in a lot were like the ghost chasers and stuff. They get all excited when they catch those. I think those are spiritual entities. We see them as orbs, but in reality, they're probably massive, bigger than we are. And then the orbs that we see in space, I don't know. Uh, One video, a woman was every time she said the name of Jesus, or she was saying good things about Jesus and God, and that thing seemed to like react to that because she was filming it. She panned out and then she filmed in, and then she would say the words, and you could see that thing reacting to every time she said it. So part of me thinks it might be good angels. I don't know. That's like a L.A. Marzulli question. um, could be both. I mean, both could be displaying or being allowed to be seen for some reason. Lorraine, question: Where in the word does God say that we are waiting for the last Gentile to be saved or the last person to be saved to the Lord? Does the word say that specifically? Thank you. Yeah, that's in Romans 11:25. Mm. Probably going to regret drinking that coffee in a little bit. Romans 11:25. It says, For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so when you look at that phrase in the Koine Greek in which it was written, that term full has come full in is associated with ships and getting all the passengers on board before you depart, or you've got everybody on board and you're now ready to go. That's the kind of idea conveyed behind that in the Greek. So that's where this idea comes from, that there is a certain number of Gentiles that will be born again as believers. And the issue is that we don't know. But we had we had these massive and great missionary movements from the first Great Awakening and the second Great Awakening, and ever since we've had denominations that have taken on mission field. Certain denominations focus on certain areas of the world, and for the better part of 200 years, the gospel was going out to every corner of the world. And as I've mentioned in previous discussions, like as the 21st century came in, we start seeing a exponential number of churches starting to close their doors for a variety of reasons. And then that only got even worse at COVID, where a lot of churches closed down because the states said, hey, you can't have church because of XYZ. Then they never opened the doors again. So a lot of churches that are strictly teaching the verse by verse, a lot of the Calvary chapels and things, and more of the conservative speakers that refuse to close down, saw their churches begin to grow massively, because it wasn't because there were more and more Christians. There were just fewer and fewer churches. So people began to migrate to these churches, and then those churches began to grow. John MacArthur, Jack Hibbs, 412, Brandon Holt House. A lot of these churches, I think, grew because other churches bent the knee essentially to the corrupt government. So it's not that there are more Christians; it's just there's fewer churches. So more and more Christians are going to the fewer and fewer churches, and they seem bigger and bigger. But yeah, so that's where that that's where that thought comes from. Sammy, question: will we know each other in heaven? I heard we won't. I think, yeah, well, absolutely we will. Um, well, I can talk about my friend Terry here in a second, but for example, in the narrative that Jesus gives regarding Lazarus and the rich man, I mean, when the rich man um, woke up in torments in hell, he could see across the um, the gulf there, and he saw Abraham and knew who he was. And then he also referred to his brothers, that he wanted uh, somebody to go back and warn his brothers so that they wouldn't come here. And he said, and Abraham said, even if somebody were to rise from the dead, they were not going to believe. Kind of forecasting what was going to happen with Christ. But he was fully aware of who people were, and he could remember his brothers from his life. And I think, my friend Terry James, who I wrote a couple books with, he had a widowmaker heart attack. He died. He was dead in the back of the ambulance, coded out, no brain activity, nothing. And he tells the story about when he went to heaven, or to I guess, the front of it, the entrance, whatever. He saw this young woman coming toward him. He saw all these young people, right, in their 20s and stuff, running and happy and healthy. But he saw this woman coming toward him, and she was young and beautiful. And he instantly knew who she was, and she knew who he was. And that was his old Sunday school teacher when he was a boy. Well, Terry's now, he was in his 70s when he had his widowmaker heart attack. So he only ever knew her as an old woman. She was an old woman when he was a boy. She was like in her 70s. So he only ever knew her as an old woman. She only ever knew him as a boy. and now he's an old man and he's there. He sees her and she instantly they recognize and she's coming over to talk to him. He said that was my old Sunday school teacher, and he only knew her with white hair and soft tennis shoes and sweater or whatever. uh, that's all, he only ever knew her like that. So now that he saw her as a 20-year-old, he's like he just knew that's who she was. So yeah, I absolutely think we will know each other. KG, Saved by Faith and Grace. Question: have you heard of the Black Israelites? What do you think of them? I see videos of them and they're pretty vulgar. Yeah, Black Hebrew Israelites. They think they're the true Israelites. It's to me another form of replacement theology, heretical, blasphemous, mark and avoid. They're like that guy in the video I shared with you. They're kind of to that level. Like you can't reason with them. You can't logic. There's nothing you can say that can prove that Jesus wasn't black or whatever. So it's that I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, they're way off base. Same thing with the British Israelism. Armstrong, I think it was Armstrong, Herbert W. Armstrong proposed that the lost tribes of Israel were really the British, and I think that's wrong too. But they're not as militant about that belief as the Black Hebrew Israelites are. So, and we know that there were Black Jews that there were Jews that can come out of or have come out of Ethiopia and have come out of other parts of Africa. They've come out of the Middle East, Afghanistan, even. So um, they've been tested, and they're biologically Jewish, or well, genetically Jewish. So I don't know. I think we have to keep the Jewish people in the proper perspective, in that God gave them both conditional and unconditional covenants. With the conditional covenants, things like the Mosaic law, it was always if then. So, like, if you obey my words, I will bless you. But if you don't, then something bad's going to happen. Like, your enemies are going to conquer you and stuff. There's all of these conditions within the law. I think they took the Ten Commandments, and not only do they have the 603 passages or verses that are further kind of codifying, like, for example, thou shalt not kill. Well, then that's further taken down to the next levels. Like, well, that includes things like intentional murder, like you murder somebody, versus accidental murder, like a manslaughter. So it's differentiated down, and that's how it ends up being so many, like 613 laws to include the Ten Commandments. Well, I mean, they also built fences and gates around those laws in order to get people from not even getting close anywhere near the law from breaking it, which is why in Israel the elevators stop on every floor on the Sabbath. So, uh, but the unconditional covenants are things like the Abrahamic covenant or the Davidic covenant or the new covenant. These things were not predicated on Israel's behavior or belief or anything. God says, I'm going to do this because I want to do it. And that's just the way it's going to be. And I'm going to bless you, Abraham. I'm going to bless your descendants from, obviously from Isaac and Jacob, and then from the 12 tribes. I'm going to bless those who bless you, and I'm going to curse those who curse you. And that promise from God has never been changed. It's never been rescinded. It's still in effect. And it's been demonstrated throughout history. Those nations that have persecuted the Jewish people have just been destroyed, and their riches and wealth torn from underneath them. And the Jews still persist. They still exist, and now they're a nation again. So I think Black Hebrew Israelites, British Israelism, any church denomination group that promotes replacement theology, I think they're all synagogue of Satan. So my 2 cents. close it, I think. Okay. Do you think the Antichrist won't be human? I think he'll be human. I don't know if he'll be fully human. Um, that's wild. Overtime questions for Holder next time. Let's do a couple. Where are we at in time? Oh man, 2 hours, 15 minutes. It's 11:15. How many are there? Oh my gosh. Okay, let me do one and then I'll do the rest next time. So this is from Melissa Bourne. Question: do you think it's possible that the beast from the sea might actually come from the sea? With all the UAP stuff over the oceans, no seas in the millennial kingdom, judgments on seas in the tribulation. My short answer is no. I like where you're going with this question because that's thinking outside the box. And I love those kinds of thinking. But if I want to be consistent in my symbolism, I know that the sea represents the sea of nations because that's explained to us in Revelation 17. Um, so the beast we know, even though it's symbolic in how it's given to us in Revelation 13, that symbolism is explained to us in Daniel 7, well, Daniel 7 and 8, but primarily Daniel 7, I think, where those beasts are the same kingdoms that we see in Daniel 2 with the nations that are represented by that statue, that multi-metallic statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamt about. He saw it as a giant statue, beautiful, awe-inspiring, just kind of magnificent. But those same kingdoms, God showed them as what they are, just wild beasts, unruly, dangerous, chaotic, nasty, violent, bloodthirsty. Well, they're given in a particular order in Daniel to match the statues. So they're given first the lion, which represents the head of gold, which represents Babylon, and then the bear with the coming up on one side with the three ribs in his mouth. That is meant to represent the Persian Empire, which was the shoulder, neck and shoulder of silver that is on the statue. And then you have the Greeks that would represent they're represented by the leopard with the wings because of their swiftness, and then they were split up into four kingdoms, but they were represented by the abdomen of bronze, and then you had the legs of iron, which would have been the Romans, and then you have the feet of iron mixed with miry clay in the 10 toes. Well, the toes we see there in the beast with the head with the horns and the crowns, and it has 7 heads. But those beasts are the same beasts that we see in Daniel 7. They're just given in kind of reverse order. And so they're a what they are now is they're like a chimera. They're just a mix of all of them together, and they come out of the sea of nations. And we know, according to Daniel 9:27, that the Antichrist comes, or really, rather, Daniel 9:26, that the Antichrist comes from somewhere from within the old Roman Empire, which stretched from, you know, England all the way down to North Africa. So anywhere in there is game in terms of where the Antichrist is going to come from. But it seems to lead one to believe that he would come from probably Europe, or he's Middle Eastern, but not Muslim, in my opinion. I don't think the Jews would ever come to believe a Muslim as being trustworthy. Because even if that guy is trustworthy, you can guarantee like 99% of the followers aren't trustworthy. Like the Jews were like, I ain't doing that again. We ain't doing October 7th again. Nope. So uh, now, could things come out of the ocean and that's why they get the judgments that they do? Quite possibly. I mean, that may be why the turning the blood, the oceans, like a third of the oceans to blood in the first trumpet judgment, or the early trumpet judgments, that that may have a strategic purpose where these things are coming out. But again, demonic beings or supernatural beings aren't going to be hindered by any physical changes to the earth. So unless they're physically bound to the earth in some type of physical form, um, I don't know. I don't know how that or why the third of the oceans turn to blood, or why all the oceans turn to blood at a certain point. And is there a reason beyond just shutting down global trade, travel, military movements? I mean, there's a lot of pragmatic reasons why turning the oceans to blood would basically limit people to a certain lane of action, that they wouldn't be able to go left or right because there's no other options. They can only go this direction. So they're being kind of channelized into the Valley of Megiddo. But it's a good question. I don't. I'm sure there's judgments that will come upon the oceans for reasons not known by us and known by God. Certain types of wickedness that have come out of the oceans, but I couldn't say specifically why, or why they're tied to the trumpet and bowl judgments. Okay, thank you guys for tonight and for hearing me out, for the all the chat participation, and for the moderators, guys. Thank you for collecting the questions and for all you do. Beanie Marty, Sir Pierce the Veil. I like that. I like Timu Antichrist. That's my thing. But I also like Beanie Marty. That's pretty good. Yeah, I think he's a CIA plant or something. But all right, guys. Well, this video will be up, I'm sure, unless the YouTube takes it down for something. So thank you guys for hanging out. I'll be on again Saturday night. I'll be on with Lauren and her husband Lance on their channel for the Approaching Midnight program. And we'll be talking more about the physical, taking care of ourselves until the Lord comes back. We've still got to stay in shape. And I know round is a shape, but that's not what we're aiming for here. Um, a little bit on that real fast. The reason why, even though as late as the hour is we think it is, why am I talking about emotional health or physical health? Or because the truth is you could be, let's just say that you're the greatest Bible scholar in the world, but if you don't take care of your body, and get diabetes, or you get a heart attack or a stroke or whatever the case is, because you're not watching your health, then you are not able to carry out your mission that God's called you to do. And I think that's incumbent upon all of us to try and, I'm not saying you need to spend 10 hours in the gym every day. That's not what anybody's saying. But just, do what you can, try to keep your energy levels up, stay strong, so that you're still being able to be used by the Lord. Because as soon as something happens to your health, that seems to begin to preoccupy your time, or your spiritual health, or your emotional health. If a relationship is going sideways in your life, that is going to take precedence to worshiping and to doing what God's called you to do. So it's incumbent upon us to keep all of those things in balance so that we can be effective soldiers for the Lord as we are coming into the most critical times of all human history. So thank you guys. I'll see you on Saturday night. Probably we'll have to set a time, but it'll probably be around 10ish, 9 Central, 10 Eastern. But we'll send out the links for all that. But thank you for everybody for hanging out tonight. Thank you, Lisa, Aldo, Emmaus, Robin, Mountain Skies, KG, Prophecy, or Joe. Hey, Joe, David, Jack, uh, Annette, Lorraine. What else we got on here? Aaron, Coco, and I'm sure I'm missing Deanna, Pamela. There you are. Tiffany, SC Bach. Thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Melissa Bourne, Carla. Uh, keep your eyes up. Keep looking up. Stay busy for the Lord. Keep doing what He's called you to do. And God bless you. Have a good night. And maybe it's tomorrow. Never know. So fingers crossed. Bye.